You probably use less than 5 buttons on your remote, so why does it have 50? Look at your TV remote right now, not later, right now. Count how many buttons you actually use. Power, volume, channel, maybe Netflix, that's it. Now look again. There are dozens of other buttons, tiny ones, colorful ones, strange ones with symbols you've never pressed in your life. Some you don't even recognize. And yet, they've been sitting there for years, on every remote, in every house, across the entire world. Here's the weird part. Most people use less than 20% of their remote, which means 80% of those buttons are basically ignored. So why do they exist? Why would companies design something so cluttered when simpler is clearly better? Is it bad design? Or is there something much smarter happening behind the scenes? Because those useless buttons might not be useless at all. Here's something surprising. The number of buttons on a remote is not random. It's intentional. In fact, studies in product design show something interesting. When people see more buttons, they feel like the device is more powerful, even if they never use those buttons. It creates something called the illusion of control. Your brain thinks more options, more capability. So even if you only use 5 buttons, the presence of extra ones makes the product feel advanced. It's a psychological trick, and companies know this. But that's just one layer of the story, because not all buttons are there for psychology. Some exist for a very specific reason, and it goes back to how TVs used to work. To understand modern remotes, we need to go back a few decades. In the early days of television, remotes were actually simple. Very simple. Some had just a few buttons. Channel up, channel down, volume. That's it. But then TVs started evolving. They added new features, menus, settings, picture controls, audio modes, and something called teletext. Teletext was like an early version of the internet built into TVs. It allowed viewers to access news, weather, and information using number and color buttons. That's why you still see red, green, yellow, and blue buttons on many remotes today. But here's the strange part. Most people don't use teletext anymore. In fact, many modern TVs don't even support it. Yet the buttons are still there. Why? Because once a button is added to a design, it rarely gets removed. And that leads to a surprising design problem. You might think the solution is obvious. Just remove the unused buttons, make remotes simpler. But it's not that easy, because millions of people are already used to certain layouts. If companies suddenly remove buttons, people get confused. They can't find what they are looking for, even if they never use those buttons often. This creates something called design inertia. Once users learn a layout, changing it becomes risky. So instead of removing buttons, companies keep adding more. New feature? Add a button. New streaming service? Add a button. New setting? Add a button. Over time, the remote becomes crowded. Not because designers want it that way, but because they're trying to avoid breaking user habits. And there's another hidden reason why remotes keep growing. And it has to do with who they're really designed for. Here's something most people don't realize. TV remotes are not designed only for users. They're also designed for business deals. Take a look at your remote. You'll probably see buttons like Netflix, YouTube, Prime Video. Those buttons aren't there by accident. Streaming companies often pay manufacturers to include them. Why? Because a single button gives instant access. No searching, no typing, just press, and you're in. This increases usage, which means more subscriptions, more watch time, more money. So from a business perspective, every button is valuable, even if you personally never press it. But that still doesn't explain everything, because there's one deeper reason why remotes feel overwhelming, and it has to do with how humans handle complexity. Imagine walking into a restaurant with 3 menu options. Easy choice. Now imagine a menu with 300 items. Suddenly, choosing becomes stressful. This is called choice overload. The same thing happens with remotes. Too many buttons create decision fatigue. Your brain doesn't want to think, so it defaults to the few buttons you already know. Power, volume, channel, everything else gets ignored. Over time, your brain builds a shortcut. It treats the remote like it only has a few buttons, and mentally deletes the rest. So even though the remote looks complex, your brain simplifies it automatically, which means the extra buttons don't really bother you as much as they should. But here's the twist. Some of those ignored buttons are actually incredibly powerful. You just don't know what they do. Many remotes include features most people never discover. Buttons that can change audio language, turn on subtitles, instantly adjust, picture modes, access hidden menus. There's even a button on some remotes that can reset your TV's display settings in seconds. But because these features are rarely explained, they remain unused. So from the user's perspective, they feel unnecessary. But from a design perspective, they're there for edge cases, moments when you suddenly need them. And when you do, that useless button becomes incredibly valuable. This is called just-in-case design. You may not need it every day, but when you need it, you really need it. Today, remotes are slowly changing. Some modern designs are becoming simpler, fewer buttons, cleaner layouts, more focus on voice control. You can now say, "Open Netflix," turn up the volume, search for movies, and the TV responds instantly. No buttons needed. Some remotes have removed number pads completely, others rely on touch controls. But even now, the transition is slow, because millions of users still prefer traditional remotes. They're familiar, reliable, easy to understand. So for now, the button-filled remote isn't going anywhere. So the next time you pick up your remote and see all those buttons you never use, remember this. They're not there by accident. They're there because of history, business decisions, user habits, and human psychology. What looks like clutter is actually a mix of old technology, hidden features, and clever design choices. And even though you may only use a few buttons, the rest are quietly waiting, just in case. Because sometimes, the most ignored parts of an object are the ones with the most interesting story behind them. And once you start noticing that, you'll never look at everyday objects the same way again.